The aesthetic of Christmas has changed a lot over the decades. Much of what we use now had come about starting in the Victorian times, like the Christmas tree. However, one of the most well-known pieces of Christmas decor is this elf. Some may know him as the elf on the shelf, some may know him as a knee-hugging pixie. But before we get into his story, we need a little context on what he was surrounded with. These are baubles, one of the more traditional kinds of Christmas ornaments. These specific baubles were made by a company named Shiny Bright, based in New York. Shiny Bright's baubles were one of the most common ornaments that decorated trees in the United States during World War II and through to the 1960s. Around that time, decor novelties were also producing these, jewel bright ornaments. They came in a variety of shapes. Some had figures encased in plastic crystals, others had plastic icons in starburst shapes. Bradford, another company, also made very similar ornaments. Much of the aesthetic we associate with Christmas came from post-war America, with lead tinsel, blow molds, and plastic bells. Ironically, most of the decorations weren't made in the United States, they were made in Japan.
Here's our job in Japan.
General Douglas MacArthur led an effort to rebuild the economy of Japan during America's occupation.
The beginning of another peace. Peace, if we can solve the problem of 70 million Japanese people.
Not only was this to rebuild Japan with an American influence, it was also done to pay reparations to the countries it had affected. One of these ways was to shift Japan's industrial focus from creating war instruments to creating toys and costume jewelry. It was an effort to demilitarize Japan as well as discourage communism. Soon, tin and plastic toys, jewelry, decorations, and other artificial novelties flooded the United States. Even after America's occupation ended in 1952, Japan continued to produce and export these products to the US and other countries. While it's true that Japan had already been exporting toys to the United States as early as World War I, this post-war period is considered the golden era of Japanese toys. There was a common conception, which was occasionally true, that Japanese-made toys were flimsy, low quality, and sometimes even dangerous. However, as more regulations were put in place, and as the industry began to settle, these cheap products were becoming more and more commonplace. These jewel bright ornaments, for example, were made in Japan. Shiny Bright and Bright Star also sold this flocked line in a variety of colors. An assortment of novelty ornaments were being pumped out of Japan and being sold by many different companies. It wasn't uncommon for two different companies to be selling the exact same thing. This brings us to the Pixie. One of the most common Christmas decorations in the American household during the post-war era was this. Originally called a pixie doll, however to some he's called an elf, a knee hugger, or to others he's the elf on a shelf. He, too, was made in Japan. Here's one of his brothers, and here's another one of his brothers. These pixies adorned many Christmas trees and mantles across the country. The origin of the decoration isn't entirely known, but there are enough clues to figure out what likely happened. As early as 1960, pixie dolls were being advertised in newspapers that came in a variety of occupations such as a chef, a fisherman, a drunk, a professor, a sailor, a banjo player, and they could be wound up to play music from their internal music boxes. These toys were manufactured by a Japanese company named TKR and distributed on their own or by American companies such as Kragstan. TKR had a toy line called Fancy Doll. Some pixie dolls had this label while others didn't. It's a bit of a toss-up on what TKR products had the Fancy Doll name on them. Outside of the musical toys, there were also regular dolls with different, more familiar faces. These dolls came as baseball players, city boys, football players, ice skaters, Claus couples, and elves. This elf wasn't the only product of TKR to hug its knees. They also sold a variety of hillbillies that did the same thing, sometimes in collaboration with another company named Justia, who seemed to work with TKR fairly often. Justia also had their own knee hugger line going on. It's not known where exactly TKR's knee-hugging pixie was sold or by who, with many of them not being branded. However, one name that is tagged occasionally is Rice Bayersdorfer, a florist shop in Philadelphia. Rice Bayersdorfer also sold this majorette, these pilgrims, this witch, and this Mr. and Mrs. Claus. Each of these likely came from different manufacturers, most of which unknown. TKR's pixie face would later be used in the book The Elf on the Shelf, a book based on a family tradition of placing the elf around the house so it acts as a scout for Santa. Frankel Associates Incorporated, a company based in New York, got heavy use out of TKR's pixies. They sold them on sticks, in shoes, as baskets, as ornaments, weighted bags, and different heights. The face would be copied various amounts of times in a variety of sizes. This Pixie was also made in Japan, but his origins are a little more complicated. The Rushton Company was one of the largest toy companies in the country, producing rubber-faced, cotton-filled stuffed animals with joyful expressions. One of their most popular toys was this Santa Claus, created in partnership with Coca-Cola. One of the toys Rushton had created was this elf. This face would go on to be copied many, many times, with Pixies produced by small Japanese companies such as Noel, Delta, and TKR themselves. Companies like Noel and Delta likely existed only to produce Christmas decorations, like Yuletide, who produced a mini pixie tree in Japan and some exceptionally poorly made knee-hugging pixies in Korea. There was a bit of a cycle going, with Noel and Delta also copying TKR's head and TKR copying Rushton's on occasion. It's possible TKR served as a manufacturer for Noel and Delta, but that remains to be seen. While it isn't known who designed the TKR Pixie, the designer of the Rushton elf was likely Mary Rushton herself, the founder of the Rushton Company, who sculpted many of the dolls' faces by hand. Even Shiny Bright had sold their own pixies using the TKR head. However, Shiny Bright was only selling these and likely had imported them from one of the many no-name factories in Japan. It's possible they got theirs from Sakai & Co. in Tokyo. Sakai produced a variety of knee-hugging elves and Christmas decor. Even one of them, also using the Rushton head, was packaged with bottles of Thrill dish soap in 1965. Pixies were fairly common giveaway items during the time. It wasn't uncommon for a Whitman's chocolate sampler to come with what they called a red elf. R. Dakin, another toy company, also produced their own Pixies. While some faces are possibly unique, the TKR face was still used on occasion. Kamar, another toy manufacturer, had made their own unique line of knee huggers. Each and every face was their own design, with one of them even being a little devil named Dickens. In the past, there was a time where you could go to the craft store and buy the pixie heads on their own, so you could design and sew your own body for them. A variety of heads were available, including the Rushton head. This wasn't the only time you could buy copies of the Rushton faces to use in your crafts. Rushton's clown was duplicated many times throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s. One pixie design, though modern, is even produced today. This means while these pixies may still populate nearly every antique store during the holidays, some of them never came from a factory. Some of them are made by someone at home. There is a large variety of other knee-hugging elves, some with big heads, some with big cheeks, small bodies, weird faces, made of porcelain, tree toppers, and rarely, even now, do they come in any other skin shade besides peach. The majority of knee-huggers across the country aren't labeled. It's not known who made these or when. While it's possible to tell what inspired some of them, such as the Rushton and TKR heads, the others are still random mysteries, rubber heads casted from original clay sculptures from nameless artists. It's a miracle such a common and trivial decoration was turned into a ginormous IP like Elf on the Shelf. Something so big that it became several Christmas specials, books, a musical, a float, and a toy line. All of this when the actual creator of the decoration, and even the specific design that Elf on the Shelf takes liberty with, is still a total mystery. Toys are always poorly documented, and decorations even more so. The answer to who designed the TKR Pixie, assuming that that is where this one first arrived, along with the many other unique faces, will likely elude us forever. The aesthetic of Christmas will continue to change as time goes on, but the dent that was made in plastic post-war America is huge. It'll be a long time before that dent is filled in with something else. The pixie doll, knee hugger, elf on a shelf will continue to live on people's mantles or in their attics, politely waiting with their knees tucked behind their arms for years to come.